Welcome to this special report of TAB News through TAB Media Group. I'm your host, Jennifer Rash, and we are talking about threat levels. We all need to be thinking about it. There's a lot going on in the world, and I've invited our friends, Klepper and Doug Wilson from Counter Threat Group, to help us understand more about it. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting us.
All right. These guys really know what they're talking about. They study it, deal with it, stay on top of it, and I've asked them to help us learn more and just be aware. We're not trying to scare people or even scare ourselves in all of this, but we have learned we do need to just know more, have more situational awareness, and just be ready in case of travel. Maybe there's some travel plans for this summer or coming up, and we want to be prepared. But also, just as we go to go through our daily lives and go to church on Sunday, maybe there's a house of worship that you're concerned about, and so Doug and Rick are going to help us just think through all of that. Let's start with home base, homeland, home local. Doug, what do you think about as we move through every day? What are some situational awareness tips that you would provide for us?
Well, what we like to recommend to everybody, especially now with what's going on in Iran and the Middle East, is a heightened level of vigilance.
Okay.
We talk about vigilance all the time, but it's one of those words that goes in one ear and out the other, and people say, yeah, we get it. But, I don't think everybody really pays as much attention to what all is going on around them, their surroundings, suspicious occurrences, those kinds of things as we do.
Right.
But now there really is a more elevated threat level in this country, even though typically on a national scale, when there is indications of an impending threat, or they have indications of a specific terrorist group that they know has got plans to carry something out through interrogations they've had with somebody, or perhaps something they thwarted, that will cause them to raise the national level. We're not there, but it's more of a general threat because we know there are actors within the United States of America now that have the capacity and the ability and the network and infrastructure to carry out bad attacks. Why that hasn't happened yet, we don't know. It's really nice that it hasn't,
Right.
but we know the capability does exist. We know that there are a lot of groups, or a lot of individuals that were on the terrorist watch list that got into the country several years ago that we don't know who they are necessarily or where they are. So that is a concern. And typically when you have something going on, a contingency that the United States of the West or the United States and Israel are involved in, like Iran, that will spur these groups to act. As you know from recent news, we've had four recent attacks soon after the Operation Epic Fury kicked off. And so these were lone wolf attacks, and they're the hardest ones to predict because you don't know who they are, and they act without coordination from a larger group or with other individuals. Typically, they act on their own. When you have what you also have heard of as sleeper cells that we know exist in this country, it's a little harder for them to get away with what they're going to do without leaving a trail because they have coordination usually from somebody out of the country. They have to support 2 or 3 or 4 individuals that are part of the cell. It means they have to go shopping, they have to rent apartments, they have to have vehicles, and there's a lot more breadcrumbs that they leave.
Okay.
So even though that does exist, that threat exists, and it could very well be something that could happen. The sleeper cell or the lone wolf attack, like we've already seen 4 of,
Right.
is probably the most likely thing in the near future. But we do know that the capability exists. But it is a concern.
Makes sense. So, Doug, tell us a little bit about your background and how you can actually pinpoint all of this information so smoothly and easily, because watching the news can sometimes just really get us all kind of wound up, right, and get us all anxious. How do you know how to do this, and then how do you discern what to share and what to just watch, maybe?
Well, just briefly, I had a career in the Air Force, through the Air Force and the Air National Guard. I spent 27 years in the military and went to probably over 40 countries. I don't remember the exact count. Part of that's personal, but a lot of it was military.
Right.
Was in several contingency operations, and as an intelligence officer, I was involved in threat working groups. I went through an anti-terrorism force protection school, and you basically learned a lot of information and kept up with the kind of information that could be threats to deployed units in the countries that we went to. We had to be aware of the terrorist groups that operated there, the kinds of attacks they carry out, and ways to mitigate that as a deployed group operating in some country or at a base overseas. So I went to a school called Anti-Terrorism Force Protection, where we learned how to identify vulnerabilities on military bases overseas, and how, if I were a bad actor, if I were a terrorist, how would I get onto that base? By observing patterns of life, the way people come and go, the security, the control access of the military bases, and try to look for vulnerabilities and exploit those vulnerabilities. And so part of the course was learning how to be a bad guy, and doing, if you were a bad guy, how would you do this? And so the same kind of mindset applies to everything that we do here in this country, particularly when we're looking at churches and things. If I'm a bad person and I want to do something, where are the vulnerabilities of that house of worship, church, synagogue, wherever it is that I could exploit? And you saw that happen in one of those terrorist attacks, I believe, was it Michigan, where you had the vehicle that rammed through the front. You know, there was obviously a vulnerability there that guy studied and exploited and got in through the front of the church by driving a vehicle through there. So those are the kind of things that we think about and worry about. Okay.
And so, Rick, how do you balance that? You come from a different perspective, but yet you're as involved and working through Counter Threat Group. How do you balance that with Doug, and then decide what you focus on through your group and how you share information?
Well, first of all, our common denominator is we had an interest in churches, and we were seeing incidents in churches that were concerning 10, 12 years ago.
Okay.
I didn't know Doug. He didn't know me, but we met through a mutual friend. But we had a concern about the threats against churches. At the time, there were not many security teams in place, or safety teams, and so we joined our world together. And so I've come from a completely different background from Doug. I was in banking for 33 years, and so but it's all kind of about risk management. But we both had a heart for churches. That's kind of what got us started, and seeing incidents against churches, and that with little or no protection. So
then you're assessing, you're watching, the situational awareness is there, you're very vigilant. How do you know when to share what and when to elevate a risk to keep people from being so scared they won't leave their homes? But where's that balance? How do you weigh that out?
One of the things that you have to struggle with when my former career is in intelligence, in the intelligence community, you can't. You've got to be realistic about the threats that you're indicating exist out there, because if you're constantly raising the alarm about there's going to be an attack, then all of a sudden it's crying wolf. People aren't paying attention. And that's why on a national level, they pick their times to really raise the threat level based on actual indications. And if it's just a general environment where we feel like something could happen that maybe nobody necessarily has the intelligence on, but we just know the environment's right for that, you've got an elevated threat risk like we have now. But when we hear something, or particularly, and Rick can talk about this at some point too, is the information sharing groups that we have with churches. When something happens at one church, particularly if it's in the local area, it's that's the kind of thing we like to put out to other churches about specific risks or threats based on an activity or something that happened that was concerning. And we've had some of those here in Alabama, and obviously we've had those nationwide. And Rick keeps up with a lot of really great data on church violence incidences or threats, and the trajectory is on a steep level up. It's been like that for a number of years now. So that's what we keep our eyes on, is what are the trends in church security, what are the actual things that are happening around the country, and what you see happening in the Jewish community, which are a lot, is going to trickle down to the Christian community and the churches. So,
I would add to
Absolutely.
that how the information. We'll get into this in more depth about information sharing. There is no apparatus to disseminate information to churches. Doug's talking about threat levels that are given by the Department of Homeland Security or whoever, FBI, but there's not a direct linkage to churches. They recognize that.
Interesting.
And so we've met with agencies, those in the agencies that are here locally, and we kind of told them we wanted about our information sharing idea, and they said we're spot on because there is no formal apparatus to get information out. Now, the incidents affecting churches are the same things happening here or maybe happening in Washington State, but the incidents don't change, just the locations do.
Okay. All right, I'll tell you what, we'll be right back to talk more about information sharing and just how churches and houses of worship need to think about safety and security. All right, we're back with Doug Wilson and Rick Klepper from Counter Threat Group, and we are talking about rising threat levels in the world and how that's impacting us here at home. I'm Jennifer Rash, host of this special report on Tab News, provided by Tab Media Group. You can find out more about us at tabmedia.group. And wow, you can hear past shows on our YouTube channel, tabmedia.group, and find out more about all the things that we do in publishing and content. We provide content across all platforms. Okay, so back to our topic. We are focusing now on houses of worship and how and why to be safe and secure, and then two, the information sharing opportunities that are now available. Before we get into that, one question I have is, why are houses of worship targets? Why do they become targets, and when the world starts getting a little bit tense?
Well, particularly when you're dealing with what we have going on in Iran, there's an animosity towards the West and an animosity towards Israel. We're both working together in the same operation. And a lot of the groups that we are adversarial with, particularly in Iran, they've got an Islamic regime which denies existence. They don't want Christianity anywhere in the world. The whole caliphate mentality. And so that is an easy target. And one of the main reasons churches are targeted by anybody is it's a soft target. Soft target meaning they've got a lot of ways to get in. People aren't thinking about being attacked. Everybody's walking in multiple doors. It's just an easy thing that somebody that has the mindset of wanting to attack could do easier than a whole lot of other places. And you can get a lot of mass casualties from a church. And so it's an easy target, but it also is an ideological target and a religious target for some of these groups, particularly the terrorist groups that we've talked about earlier, which are the Islamic-based terrorism groups that we know exist in this country through sleeper cells and lone wolves.
Okay, so if you are a leader of any level, a lay leader, staff member, whatever that means at a house of worship, give a couple of tips. What are a couple of definitely make sure you're vigilant about these items? What would you say?
Control access. What are the ways that we want to be welcoming? How do people come into this facility, and do we have ushers at the areas where people are coming and entering our worship facility or the church in general? Are people being noticed? We want to welcome them, but are we also looking and making sure that we're aware of unusual behaviors, whether it's a safety team, security team, or an usher? That's a primary thing that needs to happen. The other thing is taking it seriously, understanding and taking the advice from people that know that the threat exists, and being willing to at least listen to the people that know what they're talking about regarding the things that are happening in other churches in the area or even nationally to churches, and work with them to help mitigate those types of things by looking at all your vulnerabilities through a threat assessment or whatever it is.
And you all provide threat assessments through Counter Threat Group. We'll put a link to your website and information in the show notes. But Rick, Doug said something about that caught my attention. I'm guessing the leadership of churches are really concerned about keeping the warm and welcoming feel while being protected. So you don't want to have to walk through something where you get checked, like in an airport situation or something. So how do you advise?
Well, first of all, each church has a different culture. You can't dictate how you create a safety team for one and take that to another church. So every culture is important. They have to do a self-evaluation of what kind of incidents they've had and what they're most concerned about, maybe concerning people that worship. That's kind of it, and kind of in a nutshell. Yeah.
So but I love that you recognize that, because it could be so easy to be like, we have to have metal detectors, and we have to have an agent here going, checking you, and you have to walk through, and so that could be unnerving, and it could make life different for us, our culture in our churches, in our houses of worship different. So I love that you all factor that in, and you have this sensitivity, I guess, and then you customize based on what's needed and where
we spend a good bit of time with our churches when we meet with them and kind of understand their culture. Even off premises, we know a little bit about them, because every denomination, and we do to all denominations, they all have different types of threats against them specifically. So it may be ideological, it may be positions on certain hot button topics.
Right.
So you have to kind of understand where they are before you start that conversation.
So it's not just a cookie cutter formula.
No.
You have to adapt it.
You got to understand, listen to what they're telling you about, and their different model. Each church has their own type of model, what they want to follow, and there's no one set pattern.
And Doug, you mentioned what Jewish synagogues are dealing with. Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that. What do you mean?
Well, there have been a lot of direct threats, and I obviously don't have all the data in front of me. But as far as the one religion that's been attacked more than any in this country has been the Jewish synagogues. You've seen a lot of campus activity in some schools against Jewish students. So there just is a rising element of hatred towards the Jewish religion, Jewish people, unfortunately. And the synagogues are probably 5 years ahead of us on their security measures and them taking the kinds of levels of protection that churches probably need to consider, at least in some level. And they've gotten to the point where there's not many synagogues. And I was out west even this past summer, and we drove past a downtown area where there was a synagogue, and there was a security guy sitting out front on a Tuesday.
Oh,
I mean, it's during non-service times, and they've got full-time security. I guarantee you, they've got cameras 360 around the entire premises, because they have had so many direct threats, and they're under direct threats, and they've had attacks that have been successful.
Probably someone watching those cameras too, not just
obviously somebody's watching the cameras. They're collecting intelligence and all that, so they have to take it very seriously, because they do have. They have had a lot of direct threats in a lot of various areas.
Why this rising hatred toward the Jewish population? What's happening? What changed?
It's always been there, but then the events when they invaded Israel, when they attacked on October 7th, that kind of created more momentum. It gave more velocity to the threats. Actually, we were seeing threats immediately prior to the 8/7 event. So we were seeing activity where they were escalating threats against the Jewish community.
And you're talking about that October 7, 2024? Was that when it was?
Yeah.
That'd be
24.
right.
So, but it's always been there, but certain events make it rise, and there's certain groups that accelerate it that really have no interest in whether it's the Muslims against the Jewish community. It may be just someone who wants to accelerate and create chaos within our country. So,
and is it all religion based? Is that
everything is not religion based. I mean, you've seen over the past 4 or 5 or 6 years a lot of protests and activity that's gotten violent and destructive, and anytime you hear any of these people interviewed and they're asked a direct question about, explain what would make your grievances go away based on the subject you're protesting, and they really don't have anything to say. So people don't always know why it is they're out there protesting. They just jump on the bandwagon or get involved in some violent, stream of activity that doesn't necessarily. It's more or less they just want to go against the stream and be anti-something without understanding why they're that way.
Someone's got to protest, and so.
Now that's on the non-religious side. Now when you get to the Islamic-based terrorism, whatever, obviously they have an ideology that is totally contrary to anything Christian, or Jewish.
All right. Yeah, and it is so confusing to watch that from where we sit, where we work so hard.
Yeah.
To to be fair to everyone. And, that's so interesting.
Make a little clarification about Jewish community is the most attacked in our country and across the world, of course.
Across the world? Wow.
It's a smaller entity, smaller numbers. So there is, percentage-wise, there are a lot more. But there's just as many, there may be more attacks on the Christian community. But that doesn't get a lot of attention. It is because of historically they've been persecuted, and there's more focus on in their needs, and that's where it needs to be.
Right.
But their incidents in all levels, all areas, and they're pretty high. In fact, we don't have an apparatus for creating a threat level, but the groups we participate in, they have elevated for churches as high as it's ever been.
It's like an internal threat level, for the church community.
Got it. And does that all kind of start becoming part of the conversation you're having in these information sharing groups and how you help each other?
Right.
And I'm guessing that the leaders of the synagogues are able to teach the ones who are just coming in because, as you said, they're so far ahead. So those who've been doing security.
We learn a lot from the Jewish community.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit about this information sharing concept and how it's working and how you're involved and how others can get involved.
Well, Counterfeit Group endorses and it supports all types of information sharing groups, particularly for churches. We're actually involved. The three that we're most active in two of the three are faith-based.
Okay.
One is a national group called FBISAO. That means Faith-Based Information Sharing Analytic Organization. That is coast to coast, all denominations, and it's some of the best safety and security practitioners available as far as churches are concerned.
Got it.
We also have started an information sharing group here in Birmingham that arose out of 2 years ago. We had a safety seminar with a number of churches. Jennifer, you were there, part of it, and there was.
We were glad to help co-sponsor
that.
Yeah,
you kind of helped that idea get it started.
Absolutely.
But someone suggested we have an information sharing group. Well, for a couple of years, nothing was done about it. Our church was seeing activity, and other churches were seeing activity that maybe we need to have a call with other other law enforcement types. And so we decided that we would kind of put air under the wings of that idea, and so we helped start the information sharing group here in Birmingham.
And I love getting to be part of it, and it seems very just right on target for, like, on Sunday mornings, a church might have something unusual happen, and that church person drops it in the channel, and so everyone can be aware because maybe they're within 10 miles of that church or just a driving distance, but it makes more sense to have this group versus everybody trying to text each other, right? Or trying to catch everybody in ways that might not be as effective. So it is an app-based communication that is available for people who are in security type roles with their houses of worship. And there's a vetting process and all, so you guys are careful about who's in it, right?
Primarily are steered to those that lead the safety teams. We don't share classified information, but sometimes we share sensitive information. And so we want to make sure the right person has it and disseminates it in a way that is, structurally correct. And so, there's somewhat of a vetting, but we don't do any formal vetting. Most of the people, I will say this, we have 26 members in our local information sharing group, and most all of them we know have had extensive background checks and have been vetted by different.
But I think that's important because back to, someone who might be.
There's a level of confidentiality. You don't just go out and talk about all the stuff you know.
Exactly, and you wouldn't want someone in there that might be just assessing things to figure out something. And so
for the wrong reason.
I'm glad that y'all do that and have it. What kind of feedback have you gotten from this information sharing group and the app that y'all use?
I think it's been well received. The good thing about this app we use, it's not going to be a lot of activity unless something happens.
Right.
And it's going to be crickets most of the time. At the same time, if something happens, there are people that are
and you're ready.
They're there, and so that information can be disseminated quickly. So, but we also share best practices in this group. We talk about events that have taken place that, we kind of know the nature of those events. We may be looking at it from a perspective of, hey, that could happen here if we don't take certain, for certain remedies for our church.
Well, that's one thing I love about it is you do, and that probably comes natural for what you do anyway, but y'all take an event, you share about it, but you also evaluate and go, here's what happened. Now look, here's a couple things that if this had been done, or here's how we can think about this. Yeah, so I love how you do that and just kind of talk through that with everybody.
And something I want to mention, a lot of times, if there's a group that's really actively wanting to target a church, they're going to do what a military term, pre-operational surveillance, which means they're going to go to a church that they have in mind, and they're going to take a look. Do they have a police presence? Or how many ways can we get in? They're going to look at a lot of things. There's going to be indicators that are suspicious. They may even be taking pictures. So there's always going to be some kind of behavior that someone's going to notice. So church members have a role to play in this, and that's one of the biggest messages we want to get across is that please go to your church security safety team and let them know when you see something suspicious, or someone you've never seen before and they're acting odd, or they're just walking around the church without any real direction of where they're going. Those are the kinds of things that can thwart an attack if we get that and we're able to investigate and let other churches know this has gone on at our church, because what they'll do is they'll church hop and go around to try to find the weakest target, and that's what they're going to attack. So there's just a lot of aspects of this whole thing that make it important to share this kind of information so that you can hopefully potentially thwart something that someone has in mind to carry out.
All right. And
go ahead.
We'll put all of this in the links to all of these in those show notes. But we're going to have to run for today. But thank y'all very much for this. Be sure to check out Counter Threat Group. We'll have the links in the show notes.